the plot thickens.
Hmm.
Nick, what are your thoughts, brother? What we just read?
More persistence from Jacob. He, just like we saw in the last chapter, he doesn't give up. Tried to give him the gift, and he said no, no, and he says no. I insist. It's yours. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
like we sort of see the same type of culture still in the Middle East and in Africa and other regions of the world, where when you offer someone something, the instant reply is to say no, even though you don't want it. And if Jacob in that case would have said, all right, fine, I'll keep it, then Esau might have taken that as him actually not wanting to give them, but he just did it out of being courteous, but hoping that Esau would decline. But here, he had to insist.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been told, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've been told that in Russian culture, every time you go see a friend or a family member, you're supposed to bring some sort of gift.
Yeah, that's true in many cultures. Like you don't show up to a friend's house empty-handed.
Interesting. Yeah. Which I think is, I don't know, did we get that from the law of God, right? Don't show up to his temple without sacrifice.
Yeah.
Show up with your holy gifts, as it's called in Leviticus 6 and Hebrews 8. So it's interesting. I thought it was fascinating to me that they have this encounter, and Jacob he's not extending any trust to Esau, because obviously the last time he heard from Esau, he was planning to kill him. So he strategically moves his caravan, his family, his servants in different formations, if you will, with certain people in certain spots, knowing that Esau's approaching with 400 people. So to me, if I see my brother, whom last time I saw, he said he wanted to kill me, and now I see him coming towards me with 400 men, that's not a friendly. Like, he could have just came with some of his immediate family, some of his sons. We're going to see later that his sons are, just problems. His sons are problems. The result of extremely unrighteous parenting, for sure. So this is where I would have definitely been on guard myself, seeing 400 dudes coming at me with Esau. But thankfully, or at least in this moment here, we see that Esau's peaceful when he gets there, and he does want to reconcile. And this is where we're going to talk about this in the following chapters, because we don't get, because this actually ties into some things from the book of Jubilees that gives us some extra detail about Esau's behavior and how it changes later. But at this particular moment, Isaac is still alive, and we're going to see Isaac die in a couple chapters here. But Esau, whether it's because Isaac is still alive, because he still fears Isaac, or he just truly is having a moment of peace, which is what I think it is, honestly, because of what Jubilee says about when his attitude changes later and there's conflict. But I'm happy to see at this moment that Esau, for whatever reason, decides he wants to be peaceful and reconcile. But what tips me off that he's not wholehearted, and tell me what you guys think, is that he offers to leave some men with Jacob. To me, like, and it's 100% fitting that Jacob's immediate response is, why do that?
Yeah.
Like, that isn't, he's like, do you not see I have my own squad?
Yeah.
Have you seen Reuben and Simeon? Have you seen Judah? Like, have you seen my boys? We're good. Did you hear about Shechem? We're good. Well, I guess Shechem hasn't happened yet, but no, I just think it's interesting that why leave men? What would you guys think about that if you heard that he wants to leave some men with you? How would you feel about that?
Throw up some flags for me, but he might just be trying to kind of send him a gift in return, because he does run up to him, after not seeing your brother for 20 years. Time heals all wounds, right? And embraces him, cries on his neck. So maybe he meant well with it, but still, with everything that's happened with Jacob, I think it'd be hard to trust that there are good intentions behind it.
Exactly. And, we see in the previous chapter when Jacob was sending all these livestock to Esau, Esau might have had an idea of how large Jacob's camp was. And that might have been why he didn't come like with just him and some of his advisors, but instead with 400 men. But sort of, the size of Jacob's camp, there's obviously no need for him to have those, men that Esau would have left behind. So I don't really know if it's a strategic thing. Maybe they would be able to be messengers in case of Jacob actually having bad intentions and being able to give Esau warning beforehand. I'm not sure what Esau was thinking here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and that's a good thought as far as the size of Jacob's possessions and livestock. He may need a bunch of people to help it. If he was planning to kill Jacob and take all of his stuff, he would need all those people to help drive those livestock back to Edom. But I was thinking about the size of Jacob's family. So we know that Jacob's family goes down to Egypt later with 75 people. So do we assume now at this point that he has less than 75 people from the maidservants and menservants he acquired during his time with Laban?
Maybe, but not much fewer than that.
Yeah.
Right, because it's only a few more years here. Probably, I think, another 10 to 12 years before he goes down to Egypt. Mm-hmm. Well, no, maybe a little bit more than that, because Joseph's in Egypt for 20 years. And Joseph's 17 when he gets sold into slavery. So at this point, I don't think Joseph's already born. I don't know how old he is yet, but so anyway, yeah, it's probably another 20 years until he goes down, or maybe approximately another 20 years. But it's interesting though that he doesn't have a ton of people. I mean, like, he's got less than 75. I'll put it like that, versus 400. So it's definitely an overwhelming amount of welcoming party to meet you with. So I put in the notes here that Jacob and Esau parted in peace, but here's the interesting part. Jacob kind of he tells Esau, yeah, I'll let us travel slowly behind. I'll meet you in Edom and Seir. But then he doesn't go to Seir. He goes to Sukkot. Yep. And that's where I put this on the map here to let you guys just have a quick idea, and now everyone watching. So remember, he crossed the ford of the Jabbok. So he actually comes south and crosses this Jabbok, which is an extension river off of the River Jordan. And that means he's south of the Jabbok, as far as I can understand. But then he goes back to Sukkot on the other side of the Jabbok. And Esau would have traveled beyond the Dead Sea south towards Seir, which I think I have in the next. Yeah, if you can see in this next little photo. It's kind of hard to see, but I just wanted to show the bigger picture of, like, coming all the way from Padam Aram, where Laban's house was, in north in the Mesopotamian area, which is across the Euphrates. And then he's coming down into the area of Manahim, where it's also Sukkot area, and the Jabbok, and then Mount Seir is way down at the bottom down there, way at the bottom of the Dead Sea. So, yeah, it's interesting to me that he absolutely, like in the first encounter, it's like all these nice pleasantries, but then he doesn't just go hang out with Esau at his house.
Yeah,
he's like, you guys go on ahead. I'll meet you. And then he just turns around and goes the opposite direction. And so this is what's interesting. If you look into the book of Jubilees, it actually tells you, it gives you all the rest of this time. And I believe it's in Jubilees
29:14 to 31.
Yeah, 29. At the end of that chapter, you have him. He's moving around all of this area, guys. All this area here. Oh, 1 second. Sorry. So all this area here above the red words Sukkot, all this area up in here, he seems to be moving around up there for 6 years before he comes down and it crosses the Jordan and settles into Shechem. So in the Genesis account, you think he just immediately goes to Shechem between verses 18 and 19. But there's actually, between verses 17 and 18, there's a 6-year time period.
Yeah.
So verse 17 says, but Jacob went on to Sukkot. By the way, I love it that Sukkot is... We're going to talk about Sukkot in just a minute. Jacob went on to Sukkot, where he built a house for himself and shelters for his livestock. That's why the place was called Sukkot. And then it says, after Jacob had come from Padam Aram, he arrived safely in the city of Shechem in the land of Canaan and camped just outside the city. Now, Jubilees tells us specifically this was like a 6-year time period. During that 6 years, Isaac moved away from anywhere. He moved out of the region of Mount Seir or wherever he was living in that area to get further away from Esau, because Esau was not treating him well and actually taking his possessions. So there was like this strife and rebellion happening with Esau and Isaac that we don't get in Genesis as well, which is causing, in my understanding, like, Esau's a menace. I know that what we're seeing here in Genesis 33 seems like he's putting on a smile and trying to make peace, and he does for this particular moment. But Jacob's so put off by this, he doesn't go hang out with him, and he doesn't even go to the Levant area, the Negev, where Isaac was. He goes the opposite direction again for 6 years. and then goes and settles in actually the town of Salem outside of the region of Shechem, which I thought was interesting that he actually goes to Salem, according to Jubilees, which is outside of Shechem. So this could be why we're going to see later when Haman is introduced, or not Haman, but Shechem himself and his father Hamor. When Shechem's introduced, it says that he was the prince of the region of Shechem. Yeah. So there's a region with a central city called Shechem, and there's other towns around it. One of those other towns was Salem, where Jacob and his people settled for the area. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting. I love being able to compare and contrast some of the parallel accounts to where you start to see there's a lot more going on here. Genesis is a summary, guys. We try to say this and remind people this all the time. Genesis is a summary. It's just giving you quick little bullet points. You're not getting the fullness of everything they said and did at every point. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
I think that Jacob was used to Laban. For 20 years, he'd just been deceived over and over and over. So maybe he got better at reading people, and he could just see right through Esau. And that's why he didn't follow him. He had a lot of practice for the last 20 years.
Yeah. And we see that Jacob was right about the heart of Esau because, like Sean said in Jubilees 29, we see that when Esau has another wife, he takes all the flock of his father and just dips out and leaves his father at the well of oath alone, right? And that's when we also see Isaac sort of introducing almost like a Father and Mother's Day, where he starts giving his parents sustenance, like gifts and food and stuff, 4 times a year on the head of the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th month, the seasonal days.